Hey guys, yes, I am in the car. I kind of just work around the clock. Ludmila and Timothy are shopping. They could be 20 minutes, and so I thought I would spend it wisely. And I'm going to finish the third chapter, The Essence of Marriage, and we're going to start with deciding to love. And we will finish the chapter. So from deciding to love, then we'll go to the bargain, and we'll finish off with he stayed. So, how important is this principle to marriage itself? And we have to go back. What is this principle? It is the action of love. That's what we went through in the past, well, in the last video. The action of love, taking action. It is crucial. So in Ephesians 5:28, Paul says, husbands ought to love their wives. And he had already urged them to love their wives in verse 25. But here, just to be clear, Paul uses a verb that stresses obligation. There is no doubt about what Paul is saying. He commands husbands, they ought to love their wives. And emotions can't be commanded, only actions. And so it is actions that Paul is demanding. And he doesn't care how they feel on a given day or at a given moment. They must, this is a powerful modal verb, they must love their wives. Does that mean that it doesn't matter who you marry and that you don't have to be in love with the person that you wed? Or that the emotion is unimportant in marriage? No, that's not what he's saying. I am not proposing that you deliberately marry a person that you don't like. This is foolishness. You find someone, I really don't like that person. I think I'm going to marry them. No, it's foolishness. It's not what he's saying. But I can guarantee that whoever you marry, you will fall out of like with them. You will, it happens. Powerful feelings of affection and delight will not and cannot be sustained. It is quite typical to lose the head over heels feelings for your mate even before you get married, because our emotions are tied to so many things within our physiology, psychology, and environment. This is why it's not good to live together just years and years and then decide to get married. That's not good. A lot of people do that and they end up not getting married because this happens. It's better to first make the commitment. It's just, your feelings will ebb and flow, and if you follow our culture's definition of so-called love, you may conclude that this person can't be a person that you should marry. You see, some people, with one conflict, they just try to get out of it. It's foolishness. Our culture glorifies romantic passion. And so we say, if this was the person for me to marry, my feelings wouldn't be so up and down. Now, why is this foolishness? Because people are reading the wrong books. And I'm not being funny here. They're not reading the right books. In a chapter called Christian Marriage in Mere Christianity, and I'm going to say this again, this is a book that should be in every Christian's, every human being's library. Everyone should have C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis writes, people get from books the idea that if you have married the right person, you may expect to go on being in love forever, perpetually. So as a result, when they find that they are not, they think this proves that they've made a mistake and are entitled to a change, not realizing that when they have changed, the glamour will presently go out of the new love just as it went out of the old one. See, it's kind of trapped. You think, oh, I'm just going to change or change partners. You've fallen into the same trap. And so this is what I said before. In Good Will Hunting, Matt Damon said to, what is his name? Well, to the professor. It'll come back. He's like, the professor is like, look at these books you read. You're reading the wrong books. And he said, what are the right books? And Will started naming the right books. Of course, even Will was naming the wrong books. And in the Narnia series, if you read the character Eustace, I believe it's in Prince Caspian, or no, it's the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And C.S. Lewis is making fun of this boy Eustace. Why? Because he's reading the wrong books. And when you read the wrong books, it's like watching the wrong movies or just watching too much television. It puts nonsense into your mind. That's the name of the actor, Robin Williams. It just came to me. Robin Williams and Matt Damon. You're reading the wrong books. In any relationship, there will be frightening spells in which your feelings of love seem to dry up. And when that happens, you must remember that the essence of marriage, remember that's the title of this chapter 3, the essence of marriage is that it is a covenant. It's a covenant, it's a commitment, and it's a promise of future love. So what do? You do the acts of love despite your lack of feeling. You may not feel tender, sympathetic, and eager to please, but in your actions, you must be tender, understanding, forgiving, and helpful. And if you do that, as time goes on, you'll not only get through the dry spells, but they will become less frequent and deep, and you'll become more constant, more steady in your feelings. And this is what can happen if you decide to love. This is one of our big themes, the action of love. And now we're back to C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. I quote, "This is, I think, one little part of what Christ meant by saying that a thing will not really live unless it first dies. It is simply no good trying to keep any thrill. That is the very worst thing you can do. Let the thrill go. Let it die away. Go through that period of death into the quieter interest and happiness that follow. And you will find that you are living in a world of new thrills all the time." This is why you have to read C.S. Lewis. He's brilliant. And he tells the truth. How is this transformation possible? I think it may happen something like this. When we first are attracted to someone, we think, I want it to stay like this forever. I don't want to lose this passion. You just want to stay on the mountaintop the whole time. You can't. Got to go down to the valley. And as we've said, that ego rush cannot be sustained and cannot take you very far down the road of learning to love the person that you really married. To use C.S. Lewis's metaphor, you must let this more immature incarnation of your love die, if it is to rise again and live. You must stick to your commitment to act and serve in love, especially when you don't feel much delight and attraction in your spouse. And the more you do that, slowly but surely, you'll find your more ego-heavy attraction being transformed into a love that is more characterized by a humble, amazed reception and appreciation of the other person. The love you will grow into will be wiser, richer, deeper, and I would say more steady, less variable. But sadly, many people never let this happen because they've accepted the culture's definition of marriage. And when the thrill wears off, remember B.B. King, the thrill is gone away for good. They feel it is time for a change. This view of things leaves married people very vulnerable to affairs. Clinton. Since it is quite natural that you'll meet others who are attractive and who will hold out the promise of getting the thrill back that was there in the beginning of your relationship with your spouse. Christy Lewinsky. Yeah, so these are mistakes people fall into. Back to C.S. Lewis, another notion we get from novels and plays, listen to this, bad books, novels and plays, is that falling in love is something quite irresistible. Something that just happens to one, like measles. And because they believe this, some married people throw up the sponge. They quit and give in when they find themselves attracted by a new acquaintance. But it's not very largely in our own choice whether this love shall or shall not turn into what we call being in love. No doubt, if our minds are full of novels and plays and sentimental songs, and our bodies are full of alcohol, we shall turn any love we feel into that kind of love. Just as if you put a rut in your path, all the rainwater will run into that rut. And if you wear blue spectacles, everything you see will turn blue. And that will be our own fault. I would sum this up like, don't put nonsense into your brain. In the same chapter we're studying from Paul chapter 5, he says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her that he might sanctify her. Here it is, having washed her with the water of the word. How do you renew your mind? How do you wash your mind? How do you wash your mind so that you can see and understand reality? Paul says, the Word of God. Jesus Christ says, the Word of God. And by reading books like this, that's how to do it. Don't put nonsense into your brain. So when someone says, I don't need a piece of paper to show love, this is foolishness. You might say, yes, you do. If you love the way the Bible describes the love of two people who want to share their lives together, you should have no problem in making a legal, permanent, exclusive commitment. And the next section is the bargain. Please let this last section just sink in. It's terribly profound. In ancient times, there was something called the bride price. A prospective husband came to the father of a woman and offered him a certain sum, depending on factors such as the woman's beauty and size of her inheritance. We see that old practice and say, oh, how awful that people used to do that. Today, however, we have moved beyond that. Tongue-in-cheek, he's being fun. He's being kind of sarcastic here. We've gone beyond that. And because we're more democratic, men and women do it now to one another. We look at men and women sizing each other up and say, oh, she's in the market. Or, oh, he's got a bad deal there. And how did she ever fall for such a sales pitch? These offhand comments are telling. We tend to size up potential partners as to their assets and deficits. And in the end, we feel that we want to marry this person because he or she brings a lot to the table for us. It is almost impossible not to think in terms of how much I'm putting into the marriage and how much my spouse is putting in. And if we are getting out of the relationship as much or a bit more, we secretly hope, than we put in, then we're happy. Then again, this is a form of selfishness. But as time goes on, we always come to see our spouse's flaws. And if those flaws persist, and we find that we are now getting out of the marriage as much, no, we are not getting out of the marriage as much as we had hoped for when we made our initial investment, then we begin to do what anyone in a business does. If revenues are down, you cut expenditures. This is the marketplace relationship. And so, if my wife is not being the wife that she ought to be, or that I imagine that she should be, I simply will not put in the effort to be the husband that I used to be. It seems perfectly fair, reciprocal. But this is bad thinking. She's not doing this the way she used to. So why then should I do that? If I'm not getting the same value, I don't need to put as much into this. You tell yourself at some semi-conscious level that this behavior it's only fair and equitable. But it's really a form of revenge, kind of vengeance. And it's selfish, it's selfishness. So this is how you justify your withdrawal in your mind. But of course your spouse doesn't quite see it that way. If my wife sees me being emotionally distant or remote, not being as active in serving her needs or the needs of the family, she will feel warranted to dial back her own involvement and her commitment to me. The less you feel love and the less you act loving, the less you feel loving. And so you both spiral down and down into a dark ocean of nescience. Think for a moment how different a parent's relationship is with a child. If you have a child, you'll find that the biblical pattern of love is forced onto you. Why? Because with your child, you love him or her unconditionally. Your new child is the neediest human being you've ever met. She needs your care every second of the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you make enormous sacrifices in your life. And yet the child, for a very long time, gives you nothing in return. I don't particularly agree with this. I believe the child does give you a lot in return. A lot of beauty and love, just by looking at you and smiling. But, here's the point. And while later the child can give you love and respect, never does she give you anything like what you have given her. So we should never forget our mothers and our fathers, what they did for us. Often older children go through long stretches during which they rebel, fall apart, and they need enormous investment from you, and again, they give you nothing in return. But at every turn, whether or not they're giving to you, you give to them. After 18 years of this, even if your child is an unattractive person to everyone else, you can't help but love her dearly. Now, why is this? Because you've been forced to operate on the biblical pattern. You've had to do the actions of love regardless of your feelings, and therefore now you have deep feelings of love for your child, however lovable he or she is or not. And see, we need to apply this to our spouses. It is not surprising then that after children leave home, many marriages fall apart. Why? Because while the parents treated their relationship with their children as a covenant relationship, performing the actions of love until their feelings strengthened, here's the key. They treated their marriages as a consumer relationship and withdrew their actions of love when they weren't having the feelings. And as a result, after 2 decades, their marriages were empty, while their love for their children remained strong. Just top of my head, what do we do so that this does not happen to us? Make sure that, I'm just going to say this, make sure that Jesus Christ is the center of your relationship with your spouse. And that you're always encouraging your spouse. Remember what Paul said, to wash her mind with the Word of God, so that God is the center of your relationship. So that when the child leaves the nest, leaves the home, you and your spouse have something indestructible in common. And with that is a deep love, the deepest. And then we're going to finish off with he stayed. Many people hear this and say, I'm sorry, I can't give love if I don't feel it, because I can't fake it. Well, it's too mechanical for me. Well, I could understand that reaction. But Paul doesn't simply call us to a naked action. He also commands us to think as we act. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Remember that passage in Philippians. This means we must say to ourselves something like this. This is huge right here. Well, when Jesus looked down from the cross, he didn't think, I am giving myself to you because you're just so attractive to me, irresistible. No, he was in agony, and he looked down at us, denying him, abandoning him, and betraying him. And in the greatest act of love in history, he stayed. He didn't abandon us. He said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. He loved us, not because we were lovely to him, but in order to make us lovely. That is why I'm going to love my spouse. Speak to your heart like that, and then fulfill the promises you made on your wedding day. That's the end of chapter 3.